Hello A&P students, my name is Eric Barn, and today I'm going to be going through an activity with you guys about the appendicular skeleton. So, suppose you're a paleontologist digging up bones. While you're digging, you find some human bones from the appendicular skeleton. Now your guys' job is to identify the name of the bone and if the bone is on the left or the right side of the body. Okay, so the first bone here. I'll pause for a second to let you guys determine what bone it is. Alright, so this bone is going to be the humerus. And the way I like to identify if this is left or right is to look at the trochlea and the olecranon fossa first. So if you look here on the right, you have an anterior view, and if you look, the trochlea is going to be right here, and it will always point anteriorly. And here the olecranon fossa will always point posteriorly. Now once you identified that, the head of the humerus up here will always point medially. So if you look at this humerus right here, you're looking at the anterior view and the head points medially. So you can determine that this is a left humerus. Alright, so this is the next bone that we found. So I'll pause and give you guys a second to name it. Alright, so this bone is going to be called the scapula. And let's orient ourselves here. So if we look right here, this is going to be the coracoid process. And the coracoid process will always be superior to the inferior angle right here. So if we know that, we can turn this so it's right side up and also turn this guy so it's right side up. Okay, so now we can decide if this is a left or a right scapula. So how are we going to decide this? What I like to do is look at the spine. This is the spine right here, the spine in the acromion, and this will always point laterally. So going off the spine pointing laterally, we can determine this is a left scapula. And if the spine trick doesn't work for you, you can also look at the coracoid process and the glenoid cavity. And these will also point laterally. So even if we look from the anterior view, we can determine that this is a left scapula. So this is our next bone, and I'll pause again to give you guys a second to name it. So this bone is going to be called the tibia. And these are already orientated correctly because the tibial tuberosity here is always proximal and the styloid right here is going to be always distal. And you can also see the styloid here. So now we can decide left or right. So the way I like to determine left or right is by looking at the styloid process, which is again right here and right here. I think it's easier to determine this on the posterior view. So if you look at the posterior view and the styloid will always be on the medial aspect of the tibia. So if we think of it like that, we can determine that this is a left tibia. If it were a right tibia, the styloid would have to be over here, but it's not. So we can determine this is a left tibia. Then for our next bone, we have this, and I'll pause again for you guys to name it. Okay, so this is going to be called the patella, and you have two important bone markings here. You're going to have your base, which is on the proximal aspect, and the apex on the distal aspect. So these are both already orientated correctly. So again, the posterior aspect, you have the base and the apex. And the way I determined left or right, or the way I did it when I was in A&P, was I would take the patella in my hand, and I would point the apex away from me, and I would put it on the table, and then whichever way it leans is which patella it is. So say I put it on the table and it leaned right, it's your right patella. And if I put it on the table and it leans left, it's your left patella. Alright, and our last bone here is this one. So I'll pause one more time for you guys to name it. Okay, so this is going to be the ulna, and these are not orientated correctly, so let's orientate ourselves real quick. So we have the styloid process here and also here, the head here and also here, and then we have what I like to call the ice cream scoop part. So right here and right here. So the ice cream scoop part will always be proximal, and the styloid and the head will always be distal. So let's orientate ourselves here, just like that. So that one's correct now, and this one is also correct now. Okay, so now we can determine left or right. So just like the tibia, I like to determine this based off the styloid process. So if we look at the styloid here and here, the styloid will also always be medial. So if the styloid is medial, we can determine this ulna is a right ulna. If it were a left ulna, the styloid process would have to be right here. So that is all I wanted to go over with you guys today. So thank you for your time and have a great week.